Edwin Diaz has left the Mets for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I cannot wrap my mind around it. Holy crap. I'm still trying to process this information. You're watching Mets Daily. I'm Jake Brown. Smash that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and follow me at Jake Brown Live. You know, you know me, guys. I try to put the positive spin on moves when I can. There are certain moves that I think people go crazy for. The Brandon Nimmo deal, I think it was a good deal for the Mets. A lot of Mets fans hated it. They love Brandon Nimmo. There's emotions tied. There's emotions tied to Edwin Diaz, and I get that and what I'm about to say and what Mets fans are feeling right now. But the reality of it is this, folks. Edwin Diaz is the best closer in baseball, and you just let him go to the back-to-back defending champion Los Angeles Dodgers. That's where this stings. If you're talking about another team, if the Angels, even if the Yankees, if the Red Sox, hell, even if the Reds, even if the Phillies, for God's sakes, but the Los Angeles Dodgers, the rich just got richer, and it came at a 3-year deal. How do you let this happen? And here's the other side of it. Sure, Edwin Diaz, and what I think this came down to is he went to a team where he knows in the next 3 years he is guaranteed a title. You're going to the Dodgers on a 3-year deal. You're winning at least one and potentially 2 or 3 World Series. They're that good. And I know baseball, anything can happen, but shut up. The reality is the Dodgers are winning another in the next 3 years and probably at least 2 in the next 3 years. They're a dynasty. They're that good. And they keep adding more and more. But if it comes down to David Stearns could not match or go higher, 3 years, $75 million. The sticking point was 5 years. Seeing this number being 3 years and it being the Dodgers ruined my day. It ruined my week. Hell, it might have ruined my Hanukkah and my Christmas. A shame on David Stearns and the Mets. A damn shame. And, I think we got to hear more. We got to hear, did the Mets match it? Did he just want to go to L.A.? Because how could you blame the guy? Going to Los Angeles, better weather, probably a little bit cheaper than New York, although it's pretty much similar to New York, but always good weather. You're winning a World Series. You're guaranteed at least a ring. The guy's going to end up with a championship. With rings come even more money, more potential endorsements. You're in Hollywood. Maybe his family did not want to be in New York anymore. And listen, maybe the breaking of this clubhouse, he didn't want to be a part of it. From the team trading Nimmo to potentially now moving on from Alonso, which we're going to end up talking about, this week, to maybe Juan Soto. He didn't love his presence. Maybe he doesn't love Mendoza. I don't know. But it feels like the Mets did not want to blow that offer away and wanted to go the cheaper route. And that's where this is concerning. And the real concern is this. He's going to the team that you're going to have to get by to do your ultimate goal, and that's win a championship. How are you going to win a championship? The Dodgers now have the best closer in baseball, your closer. They still have Tanner Scott, who we wanted, who ended up not being great for LA, but now he's in a less leverage role. But they have Edwin Diaz. They have a 7-man rotation. Watch them end up getting Scooble. It's just hit inconceivable levels. We talk about the Warriors and Durant dynasty hopping to go there. That's different. That's a 12-man roster. This is a 26-man roster of all-stars. I mean, this is hitting unprecedented levels. This is topping the late 90s Yankees. Not by a mile, but this has topped what the Yankees put together and the money that they put in their team. It's actually gone way past it in some elements. And I'm sick to my stomach today. I am sick to my stomach. I was about to record, figuring out what to talk about. I read the Schwarber news, and, we'll talk about that in a second. And then within 2 minutes later, Edwin Diaz signs with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and then it came out. Then it ends up being 3 years. Unbelievable. And you almost can't blame him, but you also wonder, was this him not wanting to be back in New York? Did the Mets give him 3 for $69, and he said, nah, I'd rather go to L.A.? And here's the thing. That's what you're trying to build. You want to build a program, a team, a franchise, a clubhouse that players want to come to. And the money can only go so far. There is other elements to this. I think Juan Soto mostly came to New York for the money, but I think he did like the family element. He did like the Coens having him at his house. He did like the Coens giving his family a suite. There's other elements to it. But the reality is, if Edwin Diaz is guaranteed a championship and multiple rings, great weather, and a superstar studded team around him, with far less pressure now on him than it was in New York, how could he say no? But, everything that's gone on and is going on is just not the greatest look on David Stearns. Edwin Diaz's AAV on that 5-year, $102 million deal that he originally signed with the Mets that he opted out was 20.4. His AAV with the Dodgers is now 23, making him the largest AAV closer in baseball. Not a ton of money. It came down to one extra year and $9 extra million to go to the Dodgers. I don't have any words. I don't feel good about this, guys. And I want to see what they do next. I think similar to Nimmo, we have to see where they go next in the outfield. Now we have to see where they go at closer. It feels like they're going to sign Suarez from the Padres. That's what it feels like. But this is going to stink for a little bit. And I don't think we're really overrating Diaz. I do think he was the most dominant closer in baseball. Now, I'll play devil's advocate here just for a second to try and calm us down a little bit. I know it's hard because I'm recording this immediately after kind of reading this news. It's 12:26 p.m. Eastern right now as I'm speaking. The news happened within the last hour. I've kind of been stomaching the details, the tweets, reading any follow-ups. The other side of it is this. Edwin Diaz every other year has been great and then not great. You look at his numbers with the Mets, 2019 he was dreadful. 2020 short season, great. 2021 was up and down with a 3.45 ERA. 2022 he was remarkable, the best reliever in baseball, 1.31. 2023 he was hurt, missed the year, WBC. 2024 he had a 3.52 ERA, so he had a slow start after coming back from the injury. And in 2025 he was dominant again, 1.63 ERA. So if you want to go by how his track record is would say that next year he's going to be back to that 3 ERA guy and won't be the same dominant closer as baseball. So that's the devil's advocate, is that closers, it's finicky. Diaz himself, it's been finicky. But it still doesn't hurt any less because he's going to the freaking Dodgers. You're going to have to, if you make the playoffs, you're going to have to face this guy. And who knows your team better than he does? You got Edwin Diaz now shutting you down in the ninth inning in a playoff game. And, others will say this, playoffs. Still a lot of offseason. I don't want to be the guy to be like, season over, don't show up to Citi Field next year. There's a lot of offseason left. We have to see what else materializes in this offseason before we say fire Stearns, Mets suck, 2026 is over. But what we can say is that the Dodgers look like the team, without even making another move, that's going to win a World Series again in 2026. With a potential lockout looming in 2027. There is a very good chance the Dodgers do what the Yankees did in 98, 99, 2000 and win their third straight title next year. And it's not too early to say that. How they look, now adding the best closer in the game into the fold, it's scary in Los Angeles. But if it's a matter of the Mets didn't want to go to $23 million a year, it's an awful look for this franchise with the richest owner in the sport. Awful look. There aren't many positive spins on this. Like I said, I have to see what comes next. And maybe one of the moves that comes next is Trevor McGill. Reports are out there. Mets have called the Brewers about trading for Trevor McGill. Is that a Diaz replacement you'd be fine with? The Mets went out there and signed Devin Williams to a 3-year, $51 million deal. And when you saw that move, it felt like the writing on the wall that Diaz was gone. They wanted to say they were still in on Diaz. This doesn't mean Diaz is gone. But I think when I read that move, my first thought was Edwin Diaz is 100% gone. And that's the reality. He's gone. So it could be Suarez in free agency, if he gets a 3-year deal for less than what Diaz got. It could be a Pete Fairbanks, or it could be a trade. The Mets could go a cheaper route financially. Now, this would cost you top prospects, but you can get Trevor McGill, who's under team control for the next 2 years. The estimate he would get was $6.5 million in 2026. So, Trevor McGill the next 2 years is going to cost you 10 or less million per year. Now, is he anywhere near Edwin Diaz? Not really. But, Trevor McGill is a really good closer. The last 2 years, he's been incredible. 2.49 ERA. Last year, 30 saves. 2.72 the year before, 21 saves. He was an all-star in 2025. Obviously, the brother of Tyler McGill. So you'll have McGill and McGill, the law firm, if the Mets wanted to do it. I wouldn't hate it, but I do think it is a drop-off going from Diaz to McGill. But listen, like I keep saying, guys, could you blame a guy for wanting a guaranteed championship in great weather all year with the Dodgers? It's hard to blame him. I can't see a world where the Mets didn't at least match this offer. And I hope we hear, I hope we hear either way. I don't want this to be like we don't find out. I feel like one reporter or the Mets themselves, stirring someone will get it out of somebody of what happened here. And it being he just wanted to go to LA. And if that's the case, I think we could sleep a little bit better at night. But not great. I'm having trouble moving on from this topic. It's the topic of the day, Edwin Diaz today. But, I wouldn't hate Trevor McGill. To be honest, I would rather sign a Suarez or a Fairbanks than trade for McGill. Now, if you trade for McGill, it smells like you would go for a package of him and Peralta. If the Mets go with the Michael King in free agency, they trade Senga. Maybe they trade for McGill and Peralta. I think you can live with that. But McGill's track record is not as good as Edwin Diaz. It feels like the Mets smell that Diaz maybe hit the top of the mountain and he's going to regress. Maybe they worry about he'll pitch in the WBC next year. Maybe they just didn't see the value in giving a closer $23 million. They said, you know what? We expect Devin Williams to bounce back. He's going to cost us $10 million present day. We'll go get a Suarez. Maybe he'll cost us 15, and we'll get essentially 2 closers for the price of 1. That's what I feel the direction they go to here. If they were to sign a Suarez or a Fairbanks, or if they trade for McGill, they say, hey, you know what? We have 3 elite relievers, 3 top-end relievers in McGill, in Minter, and Devin Williams for the price of what it might cost to get Edwin Diaz, and we'll live with that. If that's where they go, fine, but they better address the holes in this lineup. That's what they better do next. One of the holes that the Mets had interest in, Kyle Schwarber, I think we all expected this. He's going back to the Phillies. He signs a 5-year, $150 million deal, the most AAV for a DH in the history of baseball. That's a good deal for Kyle Schwarber. I have no issue with the Mets not going 5 years, $150 million on Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber will be 33 years old on opening day, so it'll take him until about 38, this contract. He's a great hitter. He's a guy that's going to hit you at least 40 homers probably every year. 56, 38, 47, 46 the last 4 seasons. But I'm perfectly fine with, him not coming to the Mets. I think you saw the writing on the wall that Schwarber was going to go back to the Phillies. But what does this mean for the Mets? A guy that we'll talk about maybe tomorrow. I think Eugenio Suarez becomes a more realistic option. Carlos Mendoza spoke about third base. Looks like it'll be mostly Brett Beatty, and that's fine. But I could see the Mets getting Suarez, and then against lefties putting Suarez at third, and against righties putting Beatty at third and Suarez at DH. I think Eugenio Suarez, especially if the Mets did move on from Alonso, you replace Alonso's 35 to 40 homers with Eugenio Suarez 40 homers. I think Suarez looks like a much better signing. But we'll see about Alonso. Listen, I think it feels like the core is gone. That's what it feels like. And breaking news, and this is why I kind of want to do a live show. Fan Arts did not want me doing a live show. They said these show do better. Joel Sherman has tweeted, the Mets offer for Edwin Diaz was 3 years at $66 million with modest deferrals. You got to be freaking kidding me. You got to be kidding me. The Mets were outbid because they wouldn't go an extra $3 million and because they deferred the money. The Mets lost their best closer, the best closer in baseball, over $3 million. I need to get up and take a breather, guys. I'm pissed. Good God. You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. That's what the issue was? You couldn't give Edwin Diaz an extra $3 million? Are you kidding me? And you let him go to the best team in the league, the defending back-to-back champions? You got to be kidding me. Oh my goodness. You know, you haven't got ranting, Jake, but reading that just made me very mad. Holy crap. Wow. The Mets' final offer, again, 3 years, 66 with modest deferrals. So the Mets were outbid. Absolutely infuriating. We're talking about $1 million a year. That makes this look so much worse for the Mets. A follow-up from Joel says, the Mets expressed that there was wiggle room to go higher, but Diaz went to the Dodgers. So if that's the case, maybe the Mets would have matched the $69 million. Diaz chose the Dodgers. This is the thing when you're recording a lot. Mixed reaction here. Maybe Diaz just chose the Dodgers. Wow. You know, I think if the Mets really wanted him here, they would have said 3 for $75. There it is, folks. So the Mets had some wiggle room, 3 years, 66. They might have matched the Dodgers. Diaz wanted to be a Dodger. I think how we're going to end this show is tell you this. Edwin Diaz wanted to be a Los Angeles Dodger and didn't want to be a New York Met. And I think we can stomach that. We can understand that as Mets fans. Why would you not want to win a championship? And that's what this feels like in the end. Wow. All right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap up today's show. Smash that thumbs up. Follow me at Jake Brown Live. Hit that subscribe button. You know, Diaz wanted to be a Dodger. That's how we'll end it today. You know, the Mets maybe had a little wiggle room. That's that. Diaz goes to the Dodgers, 3 years, $69 million, and the Mets will move on. We'll have more reaction tomorrow. Maybe the Mets make a move before then. We'll discuss. Thank you so much for watching, folks. End of an era. You know, I'll close it with this. What a run it was watching Edwin Diaz. What a run it was watching him with the trumpets and the 2022 team that won 100 games, the 2024 playoff run. You felt really good when he came to the game, and boy, was it electric having him come out to Timmy Trumpet and Narco. You know, I got to interview those guys, and it was so cool getting to talk to him about, talk to them about the song and going behind it and working with Diaz. And it was special that ninth inning. And I think the emotional side for us, it hurts today. that we lose that fun ninth inning. But, I guess we got to trust David Stearns and move on. Let's see what they do next. Again, we got to see what the follow-up move is, but doesn't mean that today doesn't sting. Losing maybe the best closer in Mets history, one of the best ever, and the best in the league right now. So congrats to the Dodgers, I guess. Let's go Mets. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Mets Daily.